Chapter 7. Embers of Vengeance. The mask had become part of Justin, a second skin that concealed his grotesque truth and let him face the world as someone else. Behind it, he felt untouchable, unrecognizable, a man reborn. Yet with that rebirth came a growing hunger, a darkness inside him that no amount of self-restraint could quiet. It was as though the fire that had consumed his old life had ignited something deeper, more primal. Emily had planted a seed of doubt, and it had grown into a suffocating vine, wrapping itself around every waking thought. She didn't trust him. Her accusing words and suspicious glances had made that abundantly clear. Every visit, every conversation was laden with thinly veiled hostility, her questions sharp as knives. But killing Emily now would be reckless. It would draw too much attention, too many questions. No, she would have to wait. For now he would stalk her, study her, chip away at her confidence until her fear consumed her. For the past week, Justin had made Emily's routine his obsession. Each night after the house fell silent and her lights went out, he slipped from his room with the silence of a predator. He knew which floorboards to avoid, which doors creaked if pushed too far. From the shadows, he watched her live a life she didn't deserve. Her laughter grated on him, forced and brittle, like she was trying too hard to convince herself she was okay. At work, she put on a brave face, chatting with colleagues and bearing herself in tasks. But Justin saw through her facade. When she was alone, the cracks showed. She glanced over her shoulder more often than she realized. She locked and relocked her car doors. She checked the windows of her house twice before turning off the lights. She knew someone was watching, and Justin loved it. 2 days later, Justin decided it was time to push his boundaries. He slipped out of Emily's house in the early afternoon, blending into the crowds as he wandered the city streets. The prosthetic mask gave him an unsettling anonymity, his expression frozen in an uncanny imitation of life. To those around him, he was just another face in the crowd, but beneath the mask, Justin seethed with pent-up rage. He didn't know what he was looking for until he saw the man. The alley reeked of decay and desperation, the kind of place people avoided unless they had no other choice. A gaunt figure slumped against the wall, his bony shoulders hunched over a filthy jacket. The man's hands trembled as he fumbled with a syringe, the needle glinting in the dim light. Justin stopped at the mouth of the alley, his gaze locking onto the stranger. The man didn't notice him, too absorbed in his ritual, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the syringe as though it held the answer to all his problems. Here was someone no one would miss. Justin's heartbeat quickened as he stepped into the alley, the knife already in his pocket. He gripped the hilt, his fingers curling around the cold steel. The man finally looked up, his gaze hazy and unfocused. "You got something to spare, man?" the addict slurred, his voice weak. Justin didn't answer. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over the man like a dark omen. "Hey, I ain't looking for trouble," the man said, holding up a shaky hand. "Just need enough to—" The knife struck before he could finish. Justin drove it into the man's chest with a force that surprised even him. The addict's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Blood seeped from the wound, dark and viscous, staining the tattered fabric of his jacket. Justin pulled the knife free and stabbed again, the blade slicing through flesh and muscle with sickening ease. The man's hands clawed weakly at Justin's arm, but his strength was no match for the relentless assault. The third strike silenced him. The alley was quiet now, save for the distant hum of traffic and the faint drip of blood pooling at Justin's feet. He stepped back, his chest heaving as he stared at the lifeless body slumped against the wall. The man's head lolled to one side, his bloodshot eyes staring blankly into the void. Justin felt nothing. No guilt. No regret. Just an eerie calm, as though he had merely completed a task that needed doing. He cleaned himself up at an abandoned building nearby, scrubbing the blood from his hands and changing into a fresh set of clothes he had stashed in a duffel bag. The knife was wiped clean and returned to its sheath, a tool ready for its next use. By the time he returned to Emily's house, the adrenaline had faded, leaving only the cold satisfaction of knowing he had taken a life and gotten away with it. The house was quiet when he entered, Emily's car still absent from the driveway. Justin slipped into his room, locking the door behind him. He removed the mask and placed it on the bedside table, its blank expression a reflection of the emptiness he felt inside. But even as he sat in the darkness, his thoughts returned to Emily. The following morning, Justin resumed his routine. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee as the local news played softly on the TV. A reporter's voice droned on about a body found in an alley, the victim identified as an unnamed transient with a history of drug use. Authorities have yet to release details, but the death is being investigated as a homicide, the reporter said. Justin smirked, his mask resting on the table beside him. The police would find nothing. No fingerprints, no DNA, no motive. The man had been a nobody, discarded by society long before Justin had crossed his path. Across the room, Emily entered, her hair disheveled from sleep. She paused when she saw Justin, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're up early," she said, her voice cautious. Justin lifted his coffee mug in mock cheer. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd start the day early." Emily didn't respond. She grabbed a banana from the counter and left the room, her unease palpable. Justin watched her go, his smirk widening. She didn't trust him. She feared him, and that fear was a weapon he could wield. Emily's time would come, but for now, Justin had other plans.